Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. I'm happy that you're here with us as always. I'm really looking forward to the conversation that I'm getting ready to have today because it's actually one of my favorite topics, which is talking about estrogen and estrogen metabolism specifically, because this is something that I personally have not seen a lot of in the allopathic world, the importance of how the estrogen metabolizes and how that impacts all kinds of different things when it comes to our menstrual cycle. And then specifically today, we're going to be talking about breast cancer. So it all is so important for us to understand on a different level, I think, than we have. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you've heard me talking about how estrogen metabolism impacts fibroid growth and ovarian cysts, but we're really going to dive deep into this area that impacts so many women today, and that's breast cancer. So my guest is TJ Hills, who is the author of the Amazon books bestseller, Sex, Drugs, Babies, and Breast Cancer, Health Benefits of Estrogen Gene Testing, published by the Better Estrogen Foundation. TJ Hills is an advocate of estrogen metabolism gene testing as an empowering health tool for all women and a breast cancer prevention tool for those that are higher at risk. Information about where to obtain testing is at www.betterestrogen.com. The book was adapted from her speeches to corporate events, medical conferences, and breast cancer and women's groups. She has also spoken on national TV, radio outlets, and podcasts. A breast cancer patient in remission since 2009. She is a board member of the Better Estrogen Foundation and former board member of the Estrogen Gene Test Company and Hormonal Cancer Foundation. She has spent 30 plus years advising the largest institutional investors and hedge funds. Inquiries about her availability to speak at an event may be directed to info@betterestrogen.com. Welcome, TJ.
Thank you.
So excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
That was a long introduction. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I love, sometimes I know there's been a few times that I've read people's bios and later they're like, wow, okay, that was a lot. But I think it's cool and important for listeners to know the history that you have, with this subject, and that it seems like you have really talked about it to maybe physicians and other people that may not have known that information beforehand.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
A lot.
So why don't we start off with your story? Because I know that you suffered from breast cancer yourself, and sort of how you found yourself on this path.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start a little bit before
Perfect.
My breast cancer diagnosis, because the reason I do this work and the reason I've continued to do this work all of these years is because I am firmly convinced that if I had known about this testing, if I had known about estrogen gene metabolism testing, if I had known even about estrogen metabolism testing back then, and I had gotten some help earlier on when I had a lot of warning signals, or I think what you've referred to as your body's blowing smoke signals to you. I had a lot of smoke signals. I had a fire, and I didn't do that much about it. And so the reason that I keep talking about this is because I really think that women can get help. So what happened to me was roughly about 2 years before my diagnosis, I became extremely tired, and I had increasingly severe irregular bleeding. And neither of those conditions are something of my life. I have always been hyper-energetic. I had been hyper-energetic, and I'd never had irregular bleeding. Although, I was on the pill for 20 years, so who would know really?
Right.
But when I was off of it, I did, so those are two conditions that I didn't suffer from, and they became increasingly severe. I was wiped out, and I am still like a super mom, and I've had migraines my whole life. So when I started to ask for help, it was because my migraines were interfering in my supermom activities.
Right.
And then things really fell apart. And my husband, was becoming increasingly alarmed at what was happening to me. And my husband, who's like never around, actually made an appointment for me finally at a functional medicine doctor down the street from where we live, took me to the appointment.
Wow.
And she gave me like without a lot of information, like, you know, basically said, here, we're gonna get you off the pill, because they had put me on the pill to stop the irregular bleeding,
Right.
which was making everything way worse.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me.
I just want to point out that happens a lot, that in
Yeah.
doctors use it to stop the bleeding, but it goes the other way.
Well, you know, the other thing is that, you know, the few doctors who I did go to see basically pronounced me perimenopausal.
Right.
But, you know,
how old were you at the time?
At the time when this was happening, I was between like 41, 42, and then 43. Like basically when I was diagnosed, I turned 44 in the diagnosis.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I'm talking to my mother, we're going through everyone's history. Like no one had ever started menopause until their late 50s in my family.
Wow.
So I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like this is not perimenopause. This is something else. And basically I didn't get validation. When I went to the functional medicine doctor, she wound up putting me on this thing called indole 3-carbinol, which I can talk about, which is like in the DIM family, or a precursor. And so I started taking that, got off the pill. This all went on really quickly within a few weeks. And about, I don't know, I want to say within like 6-7 weeks of meeting her, I found a lump in my breast.
Oh, wow.
And so it was too late. So literally I got help right before my diagnosis. And it started helping, like it got me off the pill. I mean, really within a few weeks.
Yeah.
Got me off the pill, you know, the irregular bleeding, you know, like it was going to be a long course, but, you know, I always am really highly motivated by the thought of, if I had gotten help earlier, would I have had a much lesser diagnosis? Or would I have not been diagnosed at all?
Right.
Like if I had really gotten help way earlier.
Right.
And so that's what I talk about a lot. So my actual diagnosis, you know, I found the lump myself, and I have stage 3 estrogen receptor positive, estrogen and progesterone receptor highly positive, very aggressive cancer.
Oh, wow. Wow. So then what happened next in that situation?
So I wasn't taking it seriously because I had like a cyst in my breast removed when I was about 20. And there's no cancer in my family whatsoever. Like none. They're absolutely at that time, that's changed, but at that time there was no cancer whatsoever. In fact, it was just like a bizarre word. Like, what do you mean cancer? Like, you know, like, what are you talking about? So it was like this feeling of disbelief. So I didn't take it seriously at first. And I live right outside New York City. I have access to some of the best surgeons and hospitals in the country, if not the world. I wound up going to some little local community hospital, and I had a botched first surgery.
Oh no.
And so the guy cut through the middle of my tumor. So basically when that happens, it's like you're perforating the cancer, right? Allowing it to spread more rapidly. He didn't leave markers. And when I woke up, and I, you know, we had an agreement because I didn't want a needle biopsy, because I'm like, well, the thing's got to come out anyway.
Right.
So let's just get it out.
Right.
But he didn't take it out. He perforated it, basically took a biopsy from it, perforated it, didn't leave markers. And I wound up having to have 2 more surgeries because of the botched first surgery.
Right.
And because, so the reason I leave all my financial background in there is because I want my audience to know that I do research and data research for like the most exacting minds in finance. And I did like absolutely none of that on myself.
Why do you think that is?
You know, I don't know. You know, I think I've had a lot of time to think about this. And I think when you're younger, you're like immortal. And, I'd had a lot of sports injuries, but I never had anything like actually wrong with me, apart from like big sports injuries, which were, sports injuries. And it didn't occur to me. Also, in my journey of how I wound up getting to the irregular bleeding, fatigue, etc., I trusted all the doctors that were involved.
Sure.
And I never really second guessed them. What I did is I went to what I considered to be the best doctors. I did, basically did a little bit of research, and trusted them once I got to them.
Right.
And I think that was what I didn't do, when I had the first surgery. I also think that when you're sick, it's really hard to make good decisions and even take care of yourself in the way that you would normally.
100%. Yeah.
I think it's really, really hard to, because we want to have these healthy bodies and we want to do what's best for ourselves. And nobody is like, no matter how messed up they are in their head, really actually going out to physically sabotage themselves by trusting the medical community.
You just want to be better.
You just want to be better. Yeah. You're doing the best you can. But when you're sick, you're impaired.
Yep.
So after that botched surgery, I did I interviewed every single surgeon in New York City, went to every single hospital, did it for chemo as well, do it constantly, never really have stopped. I'm like, your crazy ex-girlfriend. I'm constantly stalking, I watch all these medical videos and I'm like, still trying to determine if I had to go through that. And for me, unfortunately or fortunately, the answer is yes.
So then you ended up having 2 more surgeries. Did you end up getting the tumor and other tissue removed at that point?
Right. So I had 2 more lumpectomies and I had an axillary dissection, which is when you have the lymph nodes removed.
Gotcha.
And I did not have full chemo because I almost died a few times in the process. And then I did have full radiation.
Okay. And so how long a period was this between all the surgeries and chemo and radiation?
I found the lump in February. And just an aside, they wouldn't give me sorry, having a brain freeze. The mammogram. They wouldn't do the mammogram until I was at a certain point in my cycle.
Huh. Okay.
Right. Like back then.
Right.
And it was like, okay, like no one was worried about it.
Right.
It wasn't just me, like nobody was worried about it. So they made me wait. So between finding the lump and finishing radiation was like the beginning of February to the September 30th.
Wow. Okay. That was pretty, so you had 3 surgeries during that time, essentially.
I had 3 surgeries, had some complications there, tried to have a full round of chemo, had a lot of complications. And then, you have like a little break period and radiation.
Yeah. Wow. That's so much on your body. So then at what point were you declared, I know that they can't ever really declare you cancer free for the long term, but
I like to call it remission.
Remission. Yeah.
I think the old word really stands in line.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, just to address that, one of the reasons I like to use that word is because I think it's really important for cancer patients to not think they're cancer free. And to continue to be mindful of, everything they're doing to their bodies for the rest of their lives, whether you're diagnosed at stage 0 or 1 or 4.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. It's a life-changing thing.
My view might be a little harsh, but, I think it's really important. I know a lot of women who the cancers come back like a long time later.
Absolutely.
And it's because they thought they were normal.
Right. In some ways, it's almost like autoimmunity. It's like, yes, you do the right things and you can keep your body in good working order. But if you start to sort of go back to the old ways, then it allows the symptomology to come back up.
Exactly how it is. I mean, cancer in my mind is a chronic illness, and it should be treated as such. It's not like an episodic thing that,
Right.
oh, this happened to me and now it doesn't exist in my body anymore.
Right. Absolutely. So then at what point did you determine, okay, I want to figure out more of this? How did you come upon the estrogen metabolism piece of it?
So I was super, super lucky. It wasn't by my own doing. Once I had that botched surgery, I basically went back to every doctor who I had ever liked or trusted in my life. And I was referred to a biochemist by one of my old internists. And so I met him, and he was doing research and treating a cohort of the merchant Marines. So he had been doing not just estrogen metabolism gene testing, but other gene testing on this like cohort of retired merchant Marine females. And so they were older. I mean, this is just one section of what he was doing. And so he had maybe at the time around 200 women. He'd been working with them for a long time. And, you know, the numbers back then were not as specific as they are now, because none of the like actual individualized testing was available. So the overall prognosis for everybody with that kind of cancer, mine being like on this end, but even in the middle or lesser cancers, is that, you know, you have a 30% chance of it coming back within 5 years. And so over the course, he had been working with these women for a really long time, and he hadn't had a single recurrence.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, well, I got to know more about that. So, you know, his attitude was actually like, so he did the initial testing, et cetera, on me, talked to me about the program, but I didn't actually begin doing any of this till after treatment stopped.
Right.
You know, there's a big debate in the medical community, especially in the holistic medical community, about whether or not you try and keep the patient healthy while they're in chemo and radiation. Or let them be poisoned completely.
Yeah.
And he was in the let them be poisoned completely camp. So
gotcha. It's because they don't want to get in the way of the treatment. Is that the basic reason?
Well, you know, like, for example, so there's some debate about, like, for example, one of the things you can do when you're in chemo is do you can do IV infusions of vitamin C, or take, just take really high doses of some antioxidant. But there's debate in the community about, well, the point of chemo is to poison.
Right.
Is to poison. And so if you're making the tissue healthier at the same time, then are you abrogating, the point of the chemo?
Right.
So, and this debate kind of continues. I mean, there's really big arguments
on both sides, I can imagine.
On both sides about it. Right.
So then you were finished with your treatment and decided to go work with him at that point?
So what I did is I did a huge amount of research, because now I put my hat on after the botched surgery. And I did a huge amount of research on adjunct treatments. I don't want to call them alternative, but they're adjunct, because when I came out of that, I still had a 30% chance of recurrence within 5 years. Right. And in my case, there were no numbers at the time, because I didn't have some of the individualized testing. I didn't qualify for it. And because I hadn't completed chemo, you could argue that I potentially had higher risk.
Right.
So I'm right outside New York City. And there's all kinds of stuff at the time and still going on. So there's stem cell treatment work, there's cancer vaccine work, which is kind of the same. There's at the time, there was a big study of adding bisphosphonates afterward. So, bone density treatment drugs. Okay. There was a big study going on, which I didn't qualify for because of timing, but, that was a big thing at the time, which I got prepared for. And then, so I started actually studying the research behind all of these adjunct treatments. And I looked at some other things, which were really, really in developmental stages. And I basically decided that the research behind the estrogen metabolism adjunct treatment was more robust. I mean, you had like decades of work. And the other stuff was really in its infancy. And there was, and still is, kind of no data. Like immunotherapy hadn't started yet in commercial use, but the concepts behind it, and you could get into some of that. But there's all kinds of things. Like, for example, even taking metformin forever. Right. So I really delved into all the research, and I decided that this was the course that I was going to pursue as an adjunct treatment.
Gotcha. So what did that all entail?
Me doing research?
No. The treatment, the
treatment's really easy. I mean, basically, you have a gene test. There, you're looking at a small panel of genes. It's not a gene, it's a panel of genes, right? Because it's just metabolism genes. Right. It's just specific places on metabolism genes. Right. And what you're looking at is your ability to excrete excess estrogen in your urine primarily, a little bit in your sweat. And that's it. So based on the mutations I had in my genes, and I had every single one of them. In fact, I didn't just have mutations. Some of the damage was that the gene was actually missing.
Whoa. Wow.
So yeah, like my body had like wiped it out.
Yeah.
And so, bottom line, the treatment is really simple. You're talking about like taking a fish oil. The biochemist I was working with feels pretty strongly about taking Bioresponse DIM because it allow, your body will take it in or absorb it better than some of the other things. That's can I ask what
Bioresponse? I haven't heard Bioresponse DIM.
So Bioresponse is basically they add a few ingredients with the DIM to allow for better absorption.
Okay.
So for example, there's a bunch of studies on DIM, and the researchers always use Bioresponse DIM.
Gotcha.
Right. Because DIM is harder to metabolize, but if you can get it in, harder for absorption. Like that's why, indole 3-carbinol is used, or pantothenic acid is used. But if you get the bioresponse in the DIM, then the body's ability to absorb it is higher.
Gotcha.
So, and a really strong antioxidant. So basically, all my gobs of research, running the gene testing company, et cetera, you're talking about like what I do for this particular part of my body is I take like really high doses of vitamin C. I take my DIM Pro and I take fish oil. And that's it. That is the treatment.
Can I ask you, because there's a lot of debate, I think sometimes around how much DIM you should take. And obviously this is individualized, but in your case, how much, daily is the DIM? What's the milligrams that you're taking?
I am taking like 300 milligrams.
300. Okay. Yeah. And then the fish oil, are you around 1,000, 2,000 milligrams, or do you go higher than that?
I am like 1,500 twice a day.
Okay. Gotcha. And then the vitamin C, is that you do it multiple times a day?
No, I take time release vitamin C. So basically I do my supplements in the morning and night. So, so vitamin C can interfere with your sleep. So I load up in the morning.
Gotcha.
So I probably take like 2,000 in the morning, and then maybe 500 or 1,000 at night.
Okay. And what do you think about glutathione as an option if you didn't do vitamin C? Because I know sometimes vitamin
there's
C
so many antioxidants. So, and I've experimented with a bunch of them. So, you have resveratrol, you have glutathione. I used to put the cream on my stomach. You have NAC, you've got like a whole host of them. And I think it doesn't matter.
As long as you're doing something.
As long as you're, like every physician or nutritionist or healthcare professional has got a preferred antioxidant. And so, and also every patient's got other things going on.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, the genes specifically? I know they all work together, there's multiple factors here, but we've talked about COMT here before on the podcast. And of course, MTHFR can be often mixed with when you have a COMT variation, you often will see that MTHFR too. So what are the other genes and what showed up on your test?
So basically, you're looking at like 2 levels of detoxification, or, to put it simply, like your ability to urinate out toxins, right? So the first phase is primarily from the CYP family. So you're looking at CYP 1A1, 1B1, 3A4. Those are the primary phase 1 detoxification genes. Right? Then you're looking at basically the GST family, right? So you're looking at GSTM1, there's like a 2, there's GST-PP, MNSOD.
Okay.
And of the ones you mentioned, you're also looking at COMT. COMT is like one of those genes that is implicated in everything.
Right.
Right. It's like magnesium, right? It's like, right. Okay.
Just throw it on there.
Right.
So,
but if I'm going to get technical.
Yeah. Go ahead and get technical.
Let's like talk about like some of the things that they tell you to do for cancer prevention.
Sure.
And what they do is they line up completely with your gene mutations. And it's not just cancer prevention, it's overall health. Like, so for example, if you're going to improve your estrogen metabolism for fibroid tumors or irregular bleeding or ovarian cysts, etc., the CYP family is the part that's responding to the DIM. And DIM is basically broccoli, right? It's broccoli, it's mustard, it's cauliflower, it's
all those cruciferous
dandelion
vegetables.
Greens. Yes. And so, so you'll see that, like, once you have cancer, all the stuff will start popping up like, oh, do this. But, you can't eat a room full of broccoli.
No.
And so
your thyroid would hate you.
Right. So if you have an illness related to this, like breast cancer or ovarian cyst or fibroid tumors or polycystic ovarian syndrome, etc., then, you can take this to get the equivalent of eating a room full of broccoli. And then, and then if you go to the phase 2 genes, which is the to simplify it, there's other ones, right? But the GST-M family, GST family, that all relates to the antioxidants. And that also relates to your ability to like process out or excrete out all the xenoestrogens. And so, you're looking at, how, depending on how many mutations you have there, that would also determine, because it's not, so the thing I didn't talk about is, you have the supplements, but then, by knowing how many genes you have mutations on in that second phase or in the GST phase, to oversimplify it, then you know how careful you have to be about all your products, because we've got chemicals which, basically mimic estrogen in America, not everywhere, but in America, like literally all around us.
Everywhere.
Like in our food and in our water. And,
in our bed.
Like in our furniture, in our, like in our skincare. But, you have to be like more careful the closer it is. So, if you're ingesting it or you're putting it on your face or your creams or your sunscreen, like then you're really getting more of a load. So based on like the amount of mutations you have in that family of genes, then you know how really careful you have to be about all of the xenoestrogens that are coming at you everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client recently say to me who she just recently got on some bioidenticals that were creams. And she was like, that was the first time she understood how impactful things that we put on our skin are, right? I think that it's only then where you're like, yeah, if I put that little bit of cream on my skin and those hormones are getting into my body, it's like everything I put on my skin is getting into my body, and I think we've just been taught if it smells good, go for it kind of a situation. And there's so many chemicals involved in just that smell.
Right. The last thing you want to do is smell good.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Use some essential oils. It'll be fine.
Right. Don't smell good.
Yeah.
Right. Don't smell good. Don't have a nice lawn.
Yeah, exactly. Grow some food on
Right.
that lawn. So at what point, like, did you start taking those things? And one thing I kind of want to bring up about DIM is that I know it can also, impact overall estrogen, right? Not just the estrogen metabolism. It can bring down the levels of estrogen. So how did that play out for you? Did you ultimately want to keep your estrogen as low as you can? Or did it not impact your estrogen quite as much?
So you interrupt me whenever you want.
Okay.
But so when I went through chemo, immediately, first round, I went into what's called chemical castration, right?
Oof.
So it's the equivalent of having a hysterectomy.
Because you had all those genes that are like, we can't handle this.
No,
okay.
it's common. Like
Gotcha.
that's like, no, it's the secret nobody tells you about.
Well,
Like,
my uncle died from complications from cancer,
from
aka
chemo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went into chemical castration. So I basically had the equivalent of a hysterectomy when I was 43. I think I can't remember, but I think my first chemo was actually on my 44th birthday.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so when that happens, right, and then they'll spend a year, given my age, seeing if there's any restoration of activity.
Sure.
Because then if there is, they have to wipe it out.
Right.
But let's just say, let's oversimplify this, and let's say you're either premenopausal or you're menopausal, right? So for me, I was immediately menopausal. So I had the equivalent of a hysterectomy, and then your levels immediately drop and they become meaningless. So you can have really low levels of point in time estrogen, right? So that's blood, urine, whatever. It's point in time.
Right.
It's just that actual moment. You can have really low levels of estrogen, like absolute levels of estrogen, and still have a metabolism problem. Absolutely. It can still be going down the wrong pathways and still not be coming out correctly, especially if you've had like prior exposures to, hormone therapy and infertility drugs or old birth control pills and even bioidentical, depending on how many mutations you have. Right. When you're premenopausal, those levels, the point in time levels, are all over the map all the time within a day, and certainly within a cycle. So the reason why I promote estrogen gene metabolism testing is because it removes the point in time issues, right? And so for your life what you're dealing with. And then, you can go ahead and treat the point in time issues. But if you have a condition, right? If you have a certain condition, like the ones we talked about, irregular bleeding, the tumors, and at the end of the line, breast cancer, right? Because, it is the end of the line, because, cancer is the only one on that spectrum that you can die from. Right. This is for your life. And you're going to have to be dealing with this and improving that function in your body if you're sick or if you have a condition. You're going to not want to eat just a lot of broccoli in your life, but actually take something like DIMPRO. And so the absolute levels, if you have these genetic mutations, don't necessarily matter. Right. And then once you're a cancer patient, you cannot systemically go ahead and try and raise them. Because there's too much debate about it, like 100%. There's too much debate about the validity of all of the studies. Yeah. And so if some people would say, yeah, go ahead and go on HRT with cancer. Right. But there's too much uncertainty. Yeah. And so in principle, cancer patients don't go about systemically raising their estrogen levels. Their estrogens, yeah. And then in your case, you said you were both estrogen and progesterone positive, right? And so in that case, you also wouldn't want to do bioidentical progesterone either. Right. So in my long course, right? So then, you're the first thing that happens in treatment is you're going through menopause with no help whatsoever. Right. So you're having cancer treatment, but you're also going through the equivalent of having a young hysterectomy.
Right.
And you can't have any help at all.
Yeah.
And so, and mind you, when I was going through this, I also wasn't doing what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because,
You
they were on
no.
the,
Yeah.
let the poison work.
Right. First.
So, if you like in my long course, the only thing that, has basically been agreed upon is like some estriol.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
or your, I don't know
Vaginally.
if you want to explain for your listeners what the difference is between estrogen, like, estrogen
Right.
is just a group of hormones.
Right. Right.
And when we say it, we really mean estradiol.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the estriol is weak.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing in all of these years which I've used.
Do you use it systemically or just, I know a lot of women will use it just vaginally.
The only reason I'm allowed to use it is because the vaginal dryness will get so bad.
Yeah.
It's impairing my ability to function. Right.
Yeah. I have a couple of clients that have gone through that, and it's, especially when you're so young, it's debilitating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's basically for me. And, there is a lot of very legitimate debate on this issue.
Right.
And I would encourage, anyone to get into examining all of those issues.
Right.
But for me personally, at this spectrum of a cancer diagnosis, there's no room for experimentation.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So, but that doesn't mean, like, DIM is one of the things that can really help.
Right.
I mean, DIM really helps with menopausal symptoms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know sometimes women, that will go on hormone replacement therapy, obviously, not necessarily with cancer in their family or having had cancer themselves, still taking DIM, and because of their estrogen metabolism not doing well, it's like, especially if you're bringing it in.
I think, so I really am a proponent of everybody in the world getting this test. And I think that, so like, you had this huge, it was like a 75% drop off in prescriptions given after the WHI study, which is like really, really debated and
100%. Yep.
And I know a ton of people who don't take HRT because of it. Right. And it's, it's basically I don't want to get into all of the politics around it or the debate about it, but in some ways, they've come out with statements later saying no.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think if everybody had estrogen gene metabolism testing, you would have a surge in HRT and bioidentical prescriptions, right? Because there's other problems with HRT. Right. You don't have to go to the end of the line with strokes and breast cancer, and you don't have to go all that far.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. But even with bioidenticals, if you've got mutations on every single gene, that doesn't mean they're safe either.
Absolutely. Because it's still bringing.
So why not get the information? Get the gene test and then know. And then if you've got like serious problems, like, vaginal atrophy so bad, you can't walk or, then you can do what you're talking about, like be taking hormone replacement, bio or pharma, and be improving your estrogen metabolism at the same time to give you some comfort.
Yep, absolutely. And I encourage women who also have, fibroid growth. It's another really important thing to understand your estrogen metabolism, because particularly if you do what I did and had a myomectomy, they're just going to come back if you're not processing that estrogen. Same thing with ovarian cysts and everything else, and so sometimes people were like, well, do I have to take DIM forever? And I'm like, well, you may have to, at least till menopause, and we'll see where things are at that point. But I think exactly what you're saying. It's such a huge component that's been missed out on, but I think now there's more tests available, right? So can you tell us more about the testing?
Yeah. And, the one thing, ironically, because my sister is a major sufferer, the one thing we haven't kept mentioning is endometriosis.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, because I would actually put that at the top of the list.
100%. Yep.
And I put breast cancer at the bottom, right?
Oh, wow.
So like endometriosis and fibroid tumors and because those are more frequent, right? Yes. Breast cancer is relatively infrequent.
Right. Right.
Like if you start stratifying the ages.
Right.
And one of the reasons that risk goes up is because of this whole, if you're 80 years old and you have like, excess estrogens recirculating because, we live in America, that builds up over time.
Yep.
If you haven't had any of the drug exposures.
Yep.
But I think if you have the information, then you know that you have to stay on it for the rest of your life. So if you're completely healthy, and you have every single mutation and you have none of these conditions running in your family and you leave a pristinely organic, protected life somewhere.
Like where?
I don't know where, but maybe in Vermont or upstate somewhere,
a different country. Yeah.
Or you're in Europe, or you're in Europe. Then, maybe you don't have to take this.
Right.
But if you have any of these conditions and you have all of the mutations, then yes, it is for life. And that's the other reason why I really promote the test, because, I think it's a big deal to tell somebody, hey, take DIM Pro for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
It's still a drug.
Yep.
In my mind, it's still a drug.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So then you've talked about the genetic tests that you oversee. Is that correct?
So no, that company is long gone.
Okay.
So the testing companies that are out there, thank God, there are a lot more. And the ones on my website, which is betterestrogen.com or betterestrogen.org, there's like a half a dozen of them. Now you need a medical professional's oversight, so they have to order it. But there's like at least 2 of those companies where their physician will do it for you.
Yeah.
So you can actually have an online consultation with their physician. They'll go through the test results with you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone like you has to order it.
Right. So I was recently trained in 3x4. So I'm just starting to use that one. Yeah.
And so 3x4 is great because they actually force you to go through your entire genome panel, because she thinks that, your genes will tell you where you ought to be paying more attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's very well done, I think, in terms of, some of these older genetic tests, obviously they kind of just told you like, all right, here are the genetic mutations or variations, but this one, because they categorize it and make it really pretty, it's definitely easier to take in and understand.
Right. And so that's one of the ones that's up there. And I only have a handful of them because I will only put up on my site the ones which I feel where first they're using the correct SNP, right? Because, the genes that I'm talking about are responsible for metabolism, period. Right. So there's like a lot of places to be tested on each one of those, CYP, 1A1, 1B1, et cetera. Right. And so, so I'm talking about looking for that specific place. At the end of the line, there are also like interpretation services for 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, where you can take the data that they give you in those tests and run it through the interpretation panels. And then that may give you, but I really hesitate. I talk about it a little bit in the website, but I really hesitate to recommend that because I'm talking about something really, really specific that might require you to take supplements for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so you ought to know the place. And that's not what's happening in the 23andMe. They're just doing a certain place.
Right.
And I think it's really hard for people, who haven't studied this, is that, there's genes, like people confuse it, like BRCA is a hereditary gene that they're looking for. And everything you and I are talking about is not necessarily hereditary.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
These are what they're called modifiable genes. So they can become damaged over your life.
Methylation.
What?
Methylation.
Yes.
And figuring out, it's fascinating though, too, because I think, this epigenetics component essentially is kind of what we're, talking about and how taking these steps in your life, you've got to work with the genes that you have, but then there's so many things that we have available for right now, at least over the counter that can, change the trajectory of your life. Like you were saying, like if you had known about this stuff
Yes.
before your breast cancer diagnosis, how that could have gone such a different way.
Yeah. I mean, these are things that are actionable.
Yep. Yep.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff out there that is not actionable. And so, I'm kind of in the camp of, if it's not actionable, there's no point in knowing even about it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
If there's not
100%.
a clinical action to be taken,
right. Then you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, for example, I have my grandmother died of Alzheimer's. I have one of the mutations, like the panels have changed, right? So they're a lot more robust now, but I have one of the APOE mutations. And it's like, well, because then they, because I get tested. So the panels are constantly changing, and the breast cancer inheritance panels are constantly changing. Okay. So about once every 2 years, all my stuff is run again.
Gotcha.
My parents both ultimately wound up dying of cancer. They had their entire genomes tested. And they don't, between the two of them, have one single solitary cancer gene.
Wow.
Not one.
Wow.
And so the panels are changing, and like maybe you're more at risk. Well, I figure I am more at risk because I have it, and my parents have now had it.
Yeah.
And while I believe that mine and my parents' cancers are actually environmental, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to figure that out in the future and be able to say, hey, if you have some combination of these 50 or 100 genes, then you are more susceptible to these environmental risks. I mean, I'm confident that they will figure that out in the far future, but we're really at the cusp of all of this.
Yep. It's like the genes and the microbiome. We're just, scratching the surface right now. And I think it holds so much powerful information. This was amazing. I could talk to you forever. There's so many more things. One thing actually I do want to just quickly cover before we close out. What about other lifestyle things versus, besides changing what you clean with and what you put on your body and that kind of thing? What other lifestyle factors you think is important when you've had cancer or cancers in your family?
I think those are the big ones. I mean, I don't want to get diversionary and start talking about gut health.
Right.
I think that is really important, though, if only to make sure that your gut is able to process the tamoxifen or the aromatase inhibitors or whatever other drug, because there's a few other ones now that you may be on for life. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
The COMT gene is in these panels. And so that's, the stress gene. So in theory, reducing your stress levels may help with your cancer. But if that were the case, then I'd be long dead. So I don't know.
You're like, I don't buy it.
I'm not buying that one. I think your body has reserves, on that are unexplored.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, remind everybody where they can be in contact with you.
Oh, so, go to my website, betterestrogen.com. It can hook you into my YouTube channel where you can listen to me drone on about this endlessly.
I love it.
My email is info@betterestrogen.com. My name is TJ Hills. My book is a quick read. It's sex, drugs, babies, and breast cancer. Because one of the things we didn't spend a lot of time talking about is drugs, because that is the primary excess estrogen that you are going to be exposed to. And it's many, many, many multiples of all the xenoestrogens that we were talking about.
So are you kind of referring more to prescription drugs or
street drugs? No, I'm talking about birth control, infertility, hormone replacement, and bioidentical.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's a big, big topic.
Yes, absolutely. And I looked through your website and I know you have some information on there about that too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my website, I've tried to streamline it, but there is, for those of you who want to, there is a whole reference area with lots of studies and
Nice. Well, and the book is always worth getting, in my opinion, because it's like you can go back and reference things all the time very easily there, so they can get that on your website or Amazon, I'm assuming.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The website links to everything.
Great. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us
Thank you
today.
for having me, and thank you for all the work you do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, it's fascinating to me how, just things are so interconnected, right? And it's really about for most of us, just cleaning up some of these basic things and having a little bit information on what our body needs.
Yes.
So yeah.
Easy stuff, but hard stuff.
But hard stuff at the same time. Absolutely. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.